The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
If you're building or buying or selling a home, the real estate crew's got news for you at the Real Estate House Party.
With attorney Rick Carter,
Real Estate House Party.
paralegal Kathy Holtshouser,
Real Estate House Party. Come in, have fun.
and comedian Tony V. Now, here's real estate attorney Rick Carter.
Joining us here on the Real Estate House Party is attorney Rick Carter, and I have the two greatest legal minds in the real estate community here with me today. This is unbelievable. Kathy Holtshouser,
Thanks for having me.
currently working part-time at Carter Law Office. Yeah.
Nothing's changed.
I'm doing a little OT this week.
Yep, she's up to 24 hours.
This is a big leap.
It's a huge leap there.
No, I worked more than 24 this week already.
She's charging me handsomely for that, Mike Procopio.
Yeah.
Does your office? Oh, this is Mike Procopio from
Hi.
Yes.
Procopio Construction.
Nice to
Mr.
see you.
Eclectic.
Eclectic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're jack of all trades there.
I don't know.
Yeah, you are. You
Yeah,
are.
we think you are, actually. So just run with it.
All
You
right, we'll
impress
run with
us, so don't burst.
Oh, I'm not
our
saying I'm
bubble.
not impressive. I was arguing with eclectic. I'm very impressive.
Hey, you know how to make pizza.
Eclectic makes me sound like that weird guy that like lives in the basement apartment and like
No,
comes,
I didn't
comes
say
in and out the sliding
No, I didn't
door.
say
And you
it's
just never know what's
eccentric.
going.
I didn't say eccentric. Eclectic.
These
That's-
damn millennials.
Don't stop. We're another podcast, and we're like condemning how the millennials weren't getting their stuff in on time, and the banker says, "I deal with a lot of millennials. Can you hang in there?"
Yeah, they said millennials are
Yeah,
our
what?
future.
They are. Well, they are.
Right.
What do you mean they don't get their stuff in on time? What's the problem?
No.
No, we say that.
Yeah.
They don't bring their big
Well,
check.
probably because you guys like want faxes and stuff like that. We don't roll like that.
Right.
No, we don't want
The
a fax.
scrolling rot fax paper.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
still
yeah,
use that.
yeah, a little. It's in a file of thermal
Hey.
paper.
Who invited him?
I know, really. Well, no,
All right.
no, he's a great guest.
Let's go.
He got here very early.
Yeah.
We've had
Listen,
a lot of prep
we
time. on
have
that.
this
We have-
many pages of notes.
I got to tell you, Mike.
I feel like this goes sideways every time you bring this many notes.
When we used to do radio, did she ever have any notes with her?
Never.
So the first time we're doing the video, she was all annoyed. I had papers in front of me. She thought I was the intelligent one there.
I
Look
felt
at-
like a rookie.
Why? Was
Yeah.
I supposed to bring notes?
No.
Because we're
This
just
is
going to fire off every
yeah,
one of
yeah,
these questions
yeah,
to you.
exactly.
Let's go.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what we should do.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually fire questions at you guys there. So this, Mike, I know you've been diligently listening to our podcast each and every
Yes.
week there. So what we've been talking about is getting a buyer ready for the purchasing process. And we've talked to brokers about that,
Yep.
right? Like a buyer's agent, why the necessity of them. We've talked to a mortgage company and why we need them. We always seem to leave out ourselves here. You got to talk to a good real estate attorney.
Carter Law Office.
Carter Law Office
Yeah.
there, yes,
Don't,
exactly.
don't call you.
Yeah.
Don't call. No, you
Don't
can call
Kathy.
me.
Call the office. Just don't.
This week you can call me.
Don't call the office either because she charges me if she answers the phone call. She's in this a la carte method now there. Anything extra, or not even extra.
Hey,
But
To be fair, lawyers have operated in the a la carte mode
I know,
forever.
I know.
Right,
You
so
get that
jumped
itemized bill, 0.17 hours.
right. So I've jumped on that bandwagon, and
Yeah, exactly.
I have
exactly.
trips to go
This is,
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is only
Yeah.
fair.
A la carte / extortion to the employer there. So if
right.
you go on the website, Mike Procopio, now that you're 34 years old,
Everything changed.
everything
last week.
changed for you. I know. So if you go on the websites, kind of the basics, we've been going over that. Today, since I have the two greatest legal minds in the industry here today, we're going to do the advanced level.
Okay.
But if you go on the websites on how to buy a house, they give you all the basic stuff there. Get your, put your plan together.
Well, they can give you A, B, C, D, and E, right? But we
Right.
actually can give you.
Oh, yeah.
We can throw little curveballs into each
Exactly.
and every idea that they tell you to do.
Exactly. So that's what we're here for today. So why don't we just
Let's jump
briefly
in.
summarize the last few shows there where we talked about a buyer's agent, why we need it. So your role, you act as a buyer's agent a lot of times too.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the importance of that, especially nowadays, because I think some seller brokers pick a buyer's offer over someone else if they're dealing with a buyer's agent. That You know,
They're
that's
familiar with,
that
right?
they're
Yeah,
familiar
but
with
they
it.
know the work product.
They
Yeah.
So
know
there's
the work
nothing.
product.
There's not. So if I'm the listing broker and I'm looking at the offers and presenting the offers, it absolutely comes into play in that discussion with the clients of what kind of a broker is representing them. Is this going to cause you problems?
Right.
Do they not have a broker? Is that going to cause us problems? Or do they have a professional, known quantity real estate salesperson that's helping them already that's going to kind of grease the process and
Right.
let it go smoothly, and then they know what's coming next. They know what they're supposed to be doing for
They're
deadlines.
prepared.
Right. Yeah.
right.
Otherwise, it's a lot more work on the selling broker, but it's a lot more work on the homeowner too, because the
Yeah.
homeowner is the one that has to rely on all of this.
Right.
So you
So
would,
that's a great point.
no, it's good. It's good, and you wouldn't recommend dual agency,
No.
right?
It's
Because you
just
need that buyer
so-
needs an advocate for
Right.
themselves.
So just to summarize that, so there's typically in a real estate transaction we have designated agency, which is you represent one party in the transaction and you
Right.
only represent that party. So if I am the seller's agent, I represent only the seller and only I represent the seller.
Right.
Another agent comes in, they're going to represent the buyer, and they have a responsibility and a legal duty and an ethical duty to advocate for their client and represent their client's best interest, not the seller's best interest, right? So you got those two things. And dual agency, where you have a problem, is there's this kind of it's not really a gray area, but there's this space in the law that allows you to represent both, which is really impossible. And it defines
Well, because there could be a conflict of interest,
Right.
If they come to a head on a certain item
right.
in the purchase and sale agreement.
Yeah, and
Who do
even
you advocate for?
Right, and even if you follow, right, because some of the things that you owe the client fall by the wayside in dual agency, right? 'Cause
Right.
You just can't do them. So, but even if you follow the law to the letter, and it's as clean as it possibly can be, there's no real way you can't pick one. You're going to advocate
Well, 'cause
one way or the
someone
other.
has to win.
Someone
in a
has to win.
conflict.
Someone
Right.
has to win. So I don't allow it in my office. I don't practice it. I don't allow my agents to practice it. We do designated agency. If someone comes into the deal and you'd be in a position where you're representing both of them, you've got to let go of one of them.
Right.
As
You've
Tony
got to
V
let go.
says,
You've got to let go of a client.
That just doesn't sound like it would work out too well.
Right.
You know?
Tony V knows that.
And Tony V,
Yeah.
It doesn't work out well. I
Right,
mean, that's
right.
at the end of the day, these are the problems that, I sit on grievance committee and professional standards, and this is what comes up. It's always
right.
it's always these, well, was
No,
this,
you're right.
this email you sent in the best interest of your client? Well,
no,
Right.
you want
That's
to,
where it comes
which
around.
Client?
Right.
Which
Which
clients are
client?
you talking
Yeah.
about? Right.
Yeah.
So at some
Yeah.
point, can you see? I know we're going to probably go off the rails a little tiny bit, but can you see in the future that maybe dual agency will go by the wayside?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I would hope so, and I would want them to clarify even the whole agency, the way that disclosure form is set up and stuff that we work with. And I know this is kind of like inside baseball in the industry, but it really could be even clearer.
Okay.
Right? Very simple. Who do you represent?
Right.
Seller or buyer? Here's
Right.
what those two things mean. There's no gray area, right? This sub agency and designated agency,
Right.
dual agency and disclosed dual agency or undisclosed.
Or
It's ridiculous.
facilitator.
Or facilitator. It's ridiculous because then what happens is, like, even the facilitator thing. That's a good segue, because facilitator is another mode that
Good
lets
question.
us. It's great because facilitator lets you represent someone and not necessarily.
yeah.
You don't owe them all
Right,
sorts.
right,
You
right.
don't owe them
You
confidentiality
don't owe
and
them anything.
all of these things. You don't owe
Right,
them
right,
anything.
right.
You're just transacting with them, right?
Right.
Well, the problem is some agencies won't pay facilitators. Like it just creates this like messy system where, if you're a buyer's agent, Rick, well, you're entitled to 2% on this deal, but if you're the facilitator, you're not entitled to anything. Well, you did the exact same thing. You both brought a buyer to the table.
Right.
It's just, I'd prefer it gets a lot more simple.
So speaking
And
of
it's probably the
commission-
real estate board that we have to argue with, which is,
Maybe
they update the form, and like everything else,
Maybe
every,
they'll listen to our podcast.
yeah,
and-
maybe. Well, note to them, when you simplify a form, you should focus on making it simpler and not more complicated.
like the new closing disclosure.
Like the new
Right,
HUD.
right, exactly. No, but you're right. The most litigated areas in the real estate world is agency. So
Oh,
you're right.
yeah.
So as a broker's commission, buyer's commission, usually you got to make sure that that's normally paid out of the seller's overall commission, right?
Normally.
Right, exactly.
I had a customer maybe 2 weeks ago that says, hey, they're a listing customer. Well, they're a friend first, and then they're a listing customer, and they went to a bunch of open houses, and they went to a FSBO. They went to a for sale by owner. It's an investment, a flipper that's doing it.
Yep.
And they called me and said, well, we don't know what to do. What do we do if he's not, it's for sale by owner? We don't know what to do with the fee. I said to them, well, don't worry about the fee, right? Like, I'm not going to charge you. This is fine. You're friends first. It turns out he was offering it, but you always have those circumstances where sometimes it's not paid by the
That's a
seller.
good point.
And if you don't have a actual buyer's agency contract, you're
You
not
don't get-
entitled to
yeah,
a fee.
you don't get a thing.
You don't get a thing. You know, the other thing that people always mess up on the fees.
Jeez, we just had to throw out one buzzword, and he's
MLS.
been off and
And
running.
he's off and running.
You know, I've had people ask me for fees on stuff before that are not members of MLS, believe it or not.
Okay.
You do not have to pay them a fee. The fee, the
Right,
2% buyer's
It's
commission
MLS.
is that right. That's to fellow members of the multiple listing service. It's not to some random licensed real estate broker in Massachusetts who's not a member of MLS. So you get that random guy that comes in, hasn't practiced in 25 years, he's not a member of MLS, and he wants 2%. Send him packing.
All right,
Right.
so you just came and hit all the main point.
Well,
in one time.
that's 20 pages
Well,
done.
would you expect anything else from the greatest legal minds in the real estate?
Not at all. And I was hoping this is where we hit. So the main point of all this is
Have a buyer's agent.
we'll have a buyer's agent and also an attorney. See, we come in late in the
Yeah.
process. You know where I'm headed with
Well, but that's foolish because you should come in very early in the process.
this. There you go.
Right.
I mean, I tell this to people all the time, right?
Right.
Don't
Right.
sign anything until you know.
Right.
Well, we're ready to do an offer. Well, you want to run it by your real estate attorney. You know?
Right.
You don't want to send them the package after you sign the P&S and say, "I need you to represent me at
Well, we
closing."
have
Well, the
that all
ship
the-
has sailed. There's nothing else they can do at
We
that
have
point.
that all the time.
All the time.
I just got an email a couple of days ago. My daughter's buying a house, and it was like a $900,000 house down the Cape, and she said, "I'd like Rick to review the purchase
Yeah.
and sale agreement." I said, "Send it over," and she sent it over. I'll
All
sign
right.
Executed. Yeah.
And she said, "Doesn't Rick have a rider or something that he'd
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
add?"
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Would have been the greatest
It
ride in
would've
the
been
world.
2 weeks ago.
So anyway,
So here,
that's the point.
that's the point. So all the major contracts. So think about it. Even a mortgage application is usually done before they even call an attorney. The buyer's agency form.
Yeah.
The seller's listing agreement.
Yeah.
And always the offers. We always talk about this. This is all signed. So everything's kind of done by the time we show up.
Yeah.
And I think on our radio show you said before, how do you have an offer which says in big bold letters, this is a
a
binding-
Contract to purchase.
this is a
Yeah.
binding
Yeah.
contract. If
Yeah.
you don't understand it,
Yeah.
have your, and this is, I always love this too, and we love brokers, we love them, and they always say, well, we're not supposed to practice law. Well, you just
Right.
filled out the
But you
offer.
don't need. But you
Yeah.
don't need an attorney.
You filled out the offer form. You
Right.
told them they don't need an attorney because you're trying to save them $850. No, it's ridiculous. I'm like, if I had $1 for every time someone told me, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's just the offer."
Yeah.
That's the contract.
Right.
That is a
Right,
purchase and
right,
sale agreement. I
right.
know we make a distinction, but it's a
Right.
distinction without a difference in most cases.
Right.
Right.
That's a contract. You are, unless you've got language in there that punts that decision down to an actual purchase and sale agreement, that is your P&S.
Right.
Right.
Welcome to the big leagues. You just signed it without a lawyer.
All right.
I mean,
So you hit it right on the head. You're at the big leagues today here. So let's coach some people since we never review offers, right? We never seem to get that call.
Well,
so
right. Hopefully
so
they'll learn.
they'll learn after
From
today
us,
there.
yeah.
So maybe we should just talk about some of the things we make sure that are in the offers.
Yeah.
Because they're not coming to us until after the fact. So maybe we should coach them a little bit or counsel them on what should be in an offer. And it's always the little things. They always get the big things right.
well,
The
because
selling
most
price.
of it's
Yeah,
it's
right. You fill in the
most
blank.
people now use a
Right.
fill in the blank that's
Exactly.
been vetted by 5,000 lawyers from
Exactly. Yeah,
all over the
exactly.
country. But
Exactly. So they fill in the blanks fine.
where it goes off the rails
Where it goes off the
is that little
additional
additional provisions.
Exactly, exactly. So maybe we should talk about a little bit about that today. You know what it is? It's always, and you guys are right. It's always they always get the right, the closing date's fine. You fill in a blank.
Yeah.
Mortgage amount. Fill
Well,
in the
the
blank.
but the thing is, we should back up. The closing date is the closing date on the purchase and sale agreement. You're bound
right.
to that closing date.
Right.
We have people that say, "Oh, we're not going to be able to get out of our, we can't sell our house until a month
Yeah.
after," and you might not have willing parties
No.
to because now they're planning on selling their house on that day and taking their money and buying another house. There's huge
No, it's a-
ramifications
no, it's
for
a-
not
yeah.
sticking to that
It's
closing
a great
date.
point. When we started like years ago before you were born.
A couple of years ago.
Those dates were etched in stone.
Yeah.
If it was closing on December 15th, closing on December 15th. You needed your mortgage financing by December 10th. You had to get it. Now it's just like people ballpark it.
Yeah, and well, I mean, one of the problems that I see from my side of it, right, is people will say, well, how fixed are these dates? So
They're
we have the
fixed.
question, and we say, look, they're fixed. Okay, this is the date. Well, what happens? Okay, so then you have to give them a real answer. Well, what happens if you need to change the date? Well, you'd have to negotiate that with the other
Right.
person. Oh, okay, and then they drop it. Well, I've had deals where it cost $10,000 to
That's
change
what I
a
was going to
closing
say.
date.
It's in negotiation with a price, with
Right.
a
Right.
money
And
dollar
it,
sign.
and it wasn't even in that instance. It wasn't even that it was like vindictive or arbitrary. A guy had stuff sitting on three tractor trailer moving trucks
Right.
at
So
$3,000 a night,
So
and my
he's
guy
out
wants to
X
kick
amount
it a
of
week and a
dollars.
half.
Right. Right.
Right.
There's real damages there. This is what it's going to cost to
Right.
change this.
And again, people have other plans outside of your world. When you're buying or selling a house,
Yeah.
you think that the whole
Not a
world
vacuum.
stops and
Yeah.
it's all about your sale or your purchase. But your sale or your purchase is affecting everybody else's down the road.
You could have 3, 4. I mean, yeah, sometimes you have an isolated sale. First time buyer coming in, buying a flipped house that's
Right.
vacant. Okay, that's isolated. There's
We're
one
seeing
transaction there.
We're seeing a lot of double,
Triple,
back to,
quad.
yeah.
I mean, you have, especially when you're in that middle market and kind of like the family homes where people are in and out and moving up and staying in the market. It really, four closings is not unheard of.
So
Right.
we should impress upon them if they don't hit that date and people aren't negotiating it,
It's going to cost you
or the
It's-
deposit money
the
Right.
deposit money.
might
Right.
be at risk.
because you
They
can't
say
perform.
You got to hit the dates. The other thing that we see, and it goes back to the offer, since we're talking about the offers, is people missing the mortgage deadline.
Right.
dates.
We talk about
you,
that all the
you
time.
have a mortgage
Oh.
contingency, but there's 2 very important dates in there that are basically you snooze, you lose on
Right.
the dates, and if you don't apply by the date,
Yep.
You're out of
stipulated,
contract.
right, you're out of contract. And if you don't get a commitment letter by the date specified, you're out, and you're going to
You're-
lose the money.
Yeah, your deposit monies are in jeopardy.
Not
then.
only if and we've talked about this before, but we can't stress enough. Even if you get that commitment letter, but it
Yeah.
says in there
Yeah.
subject to certain.
Yeah.
You're
gotta-
not,
It's not
you're
what
not,
you
you're
need
not
a
approved.
clean commitment letter. You are
clean
not
commitment.
approved.
Yeah.
And some people say, well, I can't clear that contingent. I can't clear that condition on there until a day before the closing. Well, then you can't clear it until a day before the closing.
Right.
It is what it is. Then you
So-
got to get an extension because your deposit's at risk, or you need to accept that risk. And if you want to clear the contingency and say I'm okay risking my $10,000, well, that's fine too. But consult an attorney. They'll
Right.
probably have something to say about that.
So
But
I think we use this example in that other podcast we were invited to as guests there. We had this situation where they got their commitment day, let's just say January 15th, and they said, oh, good, I got my commitment letter. I'm set. So the financing date said January 15th. They let that date go,
There's 25 conditions.
and there was a main condition, and they said, oh, we just want to see your last bank. This is where communication between the
of
banker.
2 months of their bank statements.
Because they wanted to see that she was getting child support.
Right.
And they wanted to make sure it was steady child support from the husband. And then they gave the 2 months, and they said, oh, that's not in here.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's
He
been
misses a
cash.
month.
We misses it.
He
Some
misses
days
a
he
month
gets
here
more
and
than
there.
it always makes up.
So it wasn't consistent, and she got denied, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean
sure.
that's a really extreme example because that loan did not even make it through the basic
right.
initial vetting
Right.
process of underwriting for them to even issue a normal commitment
Well,
letter.
I think
It's
I
pretty
think
common
it
though to see
did.
like, we're still waiting on tax transcripts for the IRS.
Right.
Or, some of these silly little housekeeping things that are outstanding. That's kind of one thing.
They're silly until they didn't. They
No,
never filed.
True. Right. Yeah.
You know
no,
what
you're
I-
right.
you're right.
You're right.
You're
You're right.
right.
Oh,
You're right.
we-
But
we
we
just
get used to
had
seeing
one.
those.
Oh yeah.
We just had a buyer
Oh yeah.
didn't
Oh.
file his 2016 tax return.
So what did he give them for copies then? He
Well,
must have given them
he
unfiled
didn't. I-
returns.
Right. This.
And when they asked for the
Oh,
transcripts,
no,
the IRS
he
said
was
we never
upfront
seen them.
about it, but he said, it was financing was doing 30 days. They said, all right, can we have your tax returns? He goes, what tax returns? He says, I'm
But
a
he
file.
was already in a contract. He was already in a contract to buy the house. So that was another closing we watched.
Yeah. We could sit here all
Blow
day.
up
and say-
and yeah.
All right, here's another little nuance there in the offer world. You got to keep an eye on emails and text messages these days.
Yeah.
I just read a case situation. 2 attorneys said, all right, we agree. He says, all right, I'll get you the deposit money. We'll get them to sign the purchase and sale tonight. He goes to the seller and says, oh, I just got a better offer. And they said, I'm not signing. They said, in that email, you guys agreed. So
Yeah.
email is binding.
it's considered a statute of frauds. If you have a
Yeah.
signature line down at the bottom and you guys agree to it, they're going to consider that as a binding contract.
So potentially even without the signature line. So
Correct.
I got sued.
Let's hear
I
it.
got sued over.
this is why
over-
we like Mike
yeah.
on the show.
So I
Just-
got sued. I got sued over a deal that I backed out of a deal. We were right up almost to the closing, and he's got the emails going back and forth. We were scheduling the closing, and I basically found out at the last minute, the 11th hour, that he was going to put a group home in my new luxury subdivision. So I'm sweating bullets. He hadn't disclosed this, number one, which is a problem. I mean,
Right.
it's a pertinent, that's definitely a disclosable fact of what he's going to do.
Yep.
So he hadn't disclosed it. We found out about it, and then like it was made for it. He calls us up and asks for an extension, and we said no. We said no, we're not giving you an extension. Close now or never close. So he couldn't close then. They sued us. Basically, my lawyer said you're out of contract. Don't worry about it. They sued us, and basically how it shook out was that I had demonstrated an intent to close.
Yes.
And
So
they
did-
basically determined that because I had demonstrated this intent to close, I was basically bound to it and
Wow.
closed.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. Did he put the home in?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Group home.
He sued me for $20 million over a single house lot.
Really?
Because he had a long-term contract signed with the state already to pack this group home for the next 25 years for people.
Wow.
Really?
Yes. A crazy town, but it
So it doesn't matter.
no, but it taught me a lesson about to the point that we're talking about. It
Yep.
taught me a lesson about emails because it matters, and
Because you had an intent.
objectively, I did have an intent to close right up until I didn't. But my emails were all 10 o'clock. In two Tuesdays from now sounds perfect. We'll see you there. We'll be at the right. And I had right up until then. So I mean,
So
Okay.
be
there was
careful.
probably some gray area in there because of the extensions and stuff like that, and he was out of contract. But at the end of the day, get a good real estate lawyer is what I'm going to say.
Well,
Call Carter Law, because my real estate attorney told me I was safe. My litigator told
Right.
me settle because you're going to lose.
Right.
Right.
And they were just kind of looking at it from two different angles. My real estate attorney was looking at it from he's out of contract, telling me to pound sand. My litigator was saying, yeah, but you got all these emails that demonstrate an intent to close. You're going to lose if we go to trial.
Okay. So our audience should take heed, right? You got to be very careful what you put in your emails.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
yeah.
what you're texting
Yep.
and what you're emailing.
Yeah. And then while we're on emails, never forget that your real estate agent has a duty to disclose pertinent facts. And the way the law says, the way the law reads,
Any
is that
material
any-
facts that
any
would
material of fact that will affect a person's
Bias.
decision to buy.
Yep.
So that can be anything, and it's a very broad definition. But if you are letting your mouth run away with you with the real estate agent has to by law disclose all of that.
If the seller tells the
Right.
real estate agent that
Right.
we had water back in
Right.
2012, it was
Right.
up 6
Right.
feet high, but
Yep.
we've never had it again.
Yep.
If the buyer does the broker have to tell the
The broker in that situation, if you as the homeowner told me, hey, we had water, you let your mouth run away with you. You said, hey, my basement flooded out. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. The Mother's Day flood. We had 7 feet of water down there. I have an affirmative duty to disclose to every single prospective buyer that walks in the door. Literally, what the law wants is me to meet them at the door and say, hello,
there's water in the
FYI,
basement.
they got 6 feet of water in the basement at the Mother's Day storm, and the owner said it's the worst damage they've ever seen from water. Would you like to see the house?
So
It's absurd. And I try to do it carefully, but I tell sellers all the time, be careful
What you tell me.
what you tell me. Tell me things that I need to know, and only things that you know. Facts. Don't tell me what you think. Don't suppose what might be going on. I don't care what you think might be happening
All right.
inside your walls.
So
I want to
that's
know what
great.
is happening,
Yeah.
right? And I think I got that from being burned in a number of deals, or having clients that got burned in a number of
it's
deals.
like a cleansing day.
Can
for
I
Mike.
ask you one question though, Mike?
Yeah.
So you know about the water in the basement.
Yeah.
We'll run with that example.
Yeah.
And if somebody asks you the pointed question, a buyer or a buyer's agent asks you, now do you know if there's been water in the basement? I know you have to answer that.
Yeah.
Do you have to offer that information if nobody asks you?
As a seller,
Yes.
that's a legal question, so I'll defer to Rick. But no, my understanding is as a seller, you do not. As a broker, I do. So that's why there should be, I want to be careful. I'm not advocating for people to be dishonest with their brokers or try to
Right.
game the system, but don't let your mouth run away with you. And there should be something of a wall between the seller and the broker with all the information that can be dumped out
Right.
there. That's why I use the seller disclosure form, because it's very simple. It asks them questions. They're
I
yes,
was
no.
just going to get to that.
They're yes, no's, and I tell people very clearly, this is facts. This is not, do not write what you think may or may not be happening inside your walls because your great uncle's an electrician and he told you what you think.
Is there a spot on that disclosure that says I don't know?
There's yes, no, NA, and
Right.
notes for everything. So you in a genuine situation, the questions I don't think are really worded for I don't know. They're
Okay.
have you had water in your
I
basement.
see.
There's
Okay.
one,
Yes, no, NA.
There's
you know?
one real dangerous question on that form there. So that used to be like a 3-page thing. Now it's
Yeah.
like a 7-page there. So to answer your question, Massachusetts, and I know a lot of different states might be listening to this, but Massachusetts, known as caveat emptor,
Yep.
buyer beware. So seller doesn't have to disclose a lot. Obviously, they can't promote fraud
Right,
or
yeah, right.
or misrepresent. But there's very few things they have to come up with, like Title V. They have to come up. If you have a
Yep.
faulty
Right.
Title V,
Yeah. You can't spray paint over the black mold.
Correct.
There's
Right.
liability there for
Exactly.
sure. But
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
disclosing the water you had in your
Right.
basement 10 years ago is no problem for a
Right,
seller.
right.
It is for a broker.
Right.
Right.
Lead paint, we could talk all day long
Yeah.
about. They have to disclose certain things. We won't even get into that. There's certain forms that you should have a real estate attorney help with you. To a limited degree, urea formaldehyde foam insulation, although they've backed off a little bit on that. Now it's to the best
Because
of your
it's probably
knowledge.
expired,
It's
right?
expired now.
Yeah.
It's not. So, but the big caveat to that is anything a seller is asked, he has to respond. So in that form that you're talking about, the seller's description of property, it has like 3 pages, and there's one section. If you read the very last one to the buyer, to the seller, it says, "Do you know of any condition that might affect the buyer's?" So even though we have a caveat emptor state, that's kind of turning it around. It's asking the seller
For a disclosure.
For a disclosure. Do you know anything on that? So it spins it around there, and you're right.
So, and I always tell people, focus on the wording. Read that question
Right.
carefully. It says, do you know? That is
Right.
100%
Fact,
factual
okay.
Right.
knowledge, right? I tell
Right.
people all the time, because most of the time, if you listen carefully to a seller or anyone in a real estate deal, what they'll tell you is something they think.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think the fence isn't actually on our property line. Well, I think that the
Right.
property line's here. Well, I think there was water in the basement because the previous owner thought there might have been. None of those are facts,
Right.
right? A fact is I came downstairs on Mother's Day in 2006 and there was 6 feet of water in the basement. That's a fact. You got to disclose it,
Yeah.
right, if you're
Now-
a broker.
Now, as you're disclosing it, I've had this recently there too, where he in the seller's description of property, they put in, we get a little puddling in the middle of the basement.
Well,
all of a sudden, buyer pulls in, and it's coming all through the corners. It's not, so that's that's an area.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 other examples of problems. Brokers that say it's zoned for one thing.
Yeah.
You're in big trouble.
big trouble.
Right.
If that's
Don't
off.
tell people where the property lines are.
So-
Don't tell people what the zoning is. Don't tell people what the usage is.
Right.
Don't say perfect for an in-law because 99 times out of 100 it's illegal to
Right.
put an in-law there.
Right.
So all that
So,
stuff.
so what we tell people is, don't be the source to that information.
Yeah.
Be the source to the source. Yeah. So, so if there's something like a school district, is my son going to go to school A, which is totally preferable.
Right.
And it says yes, absolutely, school A, but then they change the school districts, and now they close in the house. Now they're going to school B. What you should be saying to them, you should go to the superintendent of schools and ask them something like that. You can be the source to the source. So that's the extreme. Zoning, you're going to get in big trouble if you're not right on that. And it goes down to the minor one. I heard of this lawsuit where someone was closing and the broker told the buyer, of course we're way off our notes here. So,
I know.
but-
I was trying to follow along.
but the school, it's not anything. This is just making us look good there. So the broker said, the buyer says, well, there's some problems with the property. Broker says to buyer, don't worry about it. Just get a handyman. He'll take care of it. Implied, there wasn't much damage to it. They close, and it's like a $5,500 worth of damage.
Wow.
So they got sued just for saying something like that. Just get a handyman. So you really got to be careful of disclosures. The brokers are really on heightened. You could go
Because it's the brokers that, 9 out of 10 of these lawsuits, who ends up going to take it to fall? It's
Right.
going to be the broker's insurance company.
Right.
Yeah.
The
Right.
broker and the broker's insurance company.
Right.
And because they're the low hanging fruit. I mean,
Right.
in this deal, that's who you're going to get the insurance company. The likelihood is that the seller probably doesn't have any good insurance coverage for some sort of a lawsuit over this, and that's who they're going to come after. So we're all skittish on it in terms of how we deal with these transactions because it's like, what's the next shoe to drop?
Here's
Right.
here's another tip for that seller's description of property. Say you're about to sell a house, people back out of it because they find out there's water in the property. The sellers, any issue, buyers back out. Now they have to put it back on the market. if you don't change that seller's description of property, because now you have that information.
Right.
Yeah.
Big troubles there.
Yeah, and again, just like backing out for an inspection, now the
I
broker
was just
has an
gonna bring that
affirmative
up.
duty to disclose.
I was just going to bring that up.
A lot of times, I get these answers from listing brokers all the time when I represent buyers. Say, "Oh, why the previous deal fall apart?" Well, it was just a misunderstanding. But they have to tell me. You have to disclose, right? So, like, one of the things that we're always on top of is don't, when somebody backs out of one of my deals, if I represent a seller and it falls apart on inspection, number one, I don't go to the inspections.
Right.
I don't want to know anything that happens at the inspection. I let them in. If my seller's not comfortable with them in the house alone, I open the front door and I sit in my truck in the driveway doing work. I will not follow the inspector around typically because I don't want to know. Then I have to disclose all of that if the deal falls apart.
So you must love when they say to you, "I didn't like the home inspection report. I'll send it to you to show you why."
I refuse. I will not open the email. I refuse to accept a home inspection report. A lot of people ask for the page. Like, I'll have sellers, "I want to see the page that says this." Do you really? Like, don't. Just take it. They don't want the house. Let them go. Don't ask to see the page. Don't ask to see the report. Then we got to disclose all this stuff that's in the report. Right?
Because we had a conversation with another real estate agent about maybe the seller should get a home inspection before they put the house on the market so they can fix.
A lot of people are doing that, but you got to disclose everything. It's
right. And so the broker said,
crazy.
"I don't recommend it."
I would never recommend it.
So that's another good tip
I would
for
never recommend a free inspection.
for our people that are listening to us.
Now, for a buyer,
and that's brokers. I find when I tell brokers a lot of times I'm not going to be at the home inspection, they're like stunned. Why? You don't do that for your client? It's like, no. I do this for my client. I'm not at the home inspection. Believe me when I tell you that's better for my client. But traditionally in real estate, what's going on at the inspection? There's an inspector, there's the buyer, and there's two real estate agents trailing along behind them, just soaking up all of this bad information that they then legally are bound to disclose. Now, whether they're actually going to disclose it or not is almost irrelevant. Where it's going to come up is in a lawsuit. And they're going to say, "Hey, you saw the inspector take the panel off.
You were there.
You were there when he took the panel off. You knew that this was an issue, and he said that you had double tap breakers or whatever it was, and you didn't disclose that to my buyers and their house burned down." It's just
for a buyer, so you'd recommend, this is a little bit off of the disclosure, but for a buyer, it's very important to ask that home inspector. We've run into this before, where that home inspector doesn't do an all-inclusive inspection of the property. We had someone that had issues with a roof, calls us up. I say, "Well, what did the home inspector tell you?" He says, after the fact, after there's issues, home inspector says, "Oh, I didn't inspect the roof."
Yeah, that was ours. Stu asked about the.
Well, I didn't want to mention names, but
He asked about something about the gutter or the roof, and the home inspector said, "Oh, I didn't go up there."
Yeah.
It's just he's like, "I'm too old to climb that ladder." Oh, thank
binoculars.
you. Thank you.
That's what they do. And the other thing people should know about home inspections as you get into the winter is you're going to see 50% of that home inspection with inaccessible, could not inspect, these little notations, because they're not going to move snow, they're not going to move leaves, they're not going to dig out the condensers, they're not going to climb on the roof, they're not going to check for ice. All sorts of things that you actually are pretty interested in as a homeowner are actually not going to get inspected.
Right.
So you're kind of limited. Middle of the winter, how I laugh with some clients sometimes. Middle of the winter home inspection is basically, is the dishwasher running and does the heat turn on? Because they're not able to get any place else that they want to get at in the house to check anything.
So if there are home inspection issues, you want to get those in the purchase and sale.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you want to do a walkthrough prior to closing to make sure those home inspection issues are taken care of. The walkthrough, and I know we have thousands of pages on this, and we kind of flew through a lot of it, but when you're getting to the walkthrough, that's very important from a legal perspective. You want to make sure it's as it was when you first inspected it. Reasonable wear and tear there. I've seen so many issues with walkthrough issues where fixtures. We're supposed to have fixtures. The purchase and sale says all fixtures are supposed to remain with the property. You'll like this one where they took out all the fixtures and put in lesser value fixtures.
So now you have to clarify that on your purchase and sales going forward.
Right.
Same fixtures.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So they had a lawsuit over that. They said, "Well, you said I had to leave the fixtures. I did leave the fixtures." But they said,
Not the fixtures.
Right. You took out the $6,000 crystal chandelier from Tiffany and Company, and you put back one from Home Depot.
Exactly. Lawsuits about that. So we could go on and on about what to watch for, and the offer stage, the purchase and sale stage. We could talk about use and occupancies. We probably won't have time today on what a use and occupancy is, but if you are allowing a seller to stay in a property after the fact, you better make sure those terms are pretty definite. Not pretty definite.
Yeah,
They're very
ironclad.
succinct.
Yeah.
And we've actually seen people. It's a good thing to bring up because we've seen people use a lease. They will find a lease template, and they'll use a lease for a week or 2 weeks or 30 days. And the problem is, I mean, you can talk about that. It creates a landlord.
I was just going to say.
landlord-tenant
Tenant,
relationship,
yeah, right.
which you don't
No,
want.
you're
you
right.
want to use a use and occupancy, which is
Exactly
basically
right.
a legal agreement. It has all the
Right.
protections of a lease.
It
And
says you can stay at this property for
And I,
X
and,
amount
I,
of days.
and I put right in there, this
Yeah.
is not a
lease.
lease agreement,
Right.
and you have no rights
Yeah.
because you're right. 'Cause
Right.
if you have to evict someone, and you
It's
have to go through the Massachusetts court system, which would be
A
about
year.
that's how long we'd be able to talk about on podcast. So I guess to wrap it up,
Well, listen, I think that we should have Mike come back
You
because
gotta-
I have like 25 more questions for him.
she's never had questions before, so out there,
I'm just showing off.
you're showing off. You're
showing off that your stack is better than all
Yeah,
the rest.
exactly. So, yeah, I guess in a nutshell, I guess that's the point of this.
You guys got to keep listening because we got great tips
a lot
on how
of
to buy a
information.
house.
So next week we can talk about what happens in an offer, what happens if you're constantly getting rejected, maybe some strategies on how to get your offer accepted. So we have a lot to talk about. So thanks for joining us here on the Real Estate House Party. Again, these guys just show why they're the greatest legal minds in the real estate
believe
community.
it.
Right here. Kathy Holtshouser, currently working part-time. Carter Real Estate Law. Mike Procopio, Mr. Eclectic. Look it up. It's not a bad term.
I'm fine with it.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.